Hello, everybody, and welcome back again to another Inspire webcast. You'll be glad to know that we're going to take a break, a well-earned break away from VAT and customs issues around impending Brexit. We're going to think a bit more about some of the practical issues around fulfillment and delivery of your goods that are going to arise once the UK's transition period ends at the end of this year. And I'm delighted to say to help me through that, understand it, and to help you understand it, but being joined today by Bobby Toulis from GFS, and she's going to talk us about some of the issues that we're all going to need to get to know about. And I think, not just getting your goods through customs, but what are the fulfillment issues? What's the border friction around there? Are the declarations? We've already talked elsewhere in other presentations, and will be later, about VAT. But really, what's the basics that you should be doing now in preparation of the next few months that you've got left? So, Bobby, welcome to this webcast. If you wouldn't mind, just to introduce yourself briefly. What's your background to the audience today?
Hi, Richard. Thank you. Well, I'm from GFS. Some of you may or may not know GFS, but we were probably one of the first and now the largest provider of multi-carrier parcel services, domestic and international. We first opened up in the UK about 20 years ago, but have since opened up in Europe as part of our Brexit readiness strategy. And, we have customers that range from small SMEs shipping about 75 parcels a night to some of the big brands, the likes of Dunes and Wilko's, that are shipping thousands. Simply put, we do everything multi-carrier. We bring it all under one roof. So delivery and returns, shipping software, our own shipping software, and all the expert advice and support that you would expect to go with that.
Right, goodness, it sounds like we're in good hands for the next 15 or 20 minutes or so. Okay, Bobby, so let's start from the top. What's your view? What are you seeing in the marketplace for online retailers? How are they responding to the impending final big stage of Brexit?
Sure. I think, roughly speaking, we see them falling into sort of like two camps. The first camp would be, the retailers that are in the do nothing mode, wait and see. So, and I can understand why, because let's face it, with so much uncertainty and lack of clarity coming from the government, it's very easy to say, well, let's wait and see what happens. And also, this has been going on for how long? I think a lot of businesses now have got Brexit fatigue. That's what we're seeing. It seems to be falling on deaf ears. But also, how can we forget what's happened recently with COVID? Suddenly, we're not talking about Brexit. We've been trying to deal with the fallout from COVID. So we've got this camp one, which is the wait and see, the ones that are suffering with a bit of inertia, let's say. And then we've got the second camp, which is the camp that is taking a slightly different approach, where they are thinking, and many of our customers are in this camp, they're thinking about, let's prepare for worst case scenario. And worst case scenario is not all doom and gloom. Worst case scenario would be to set up, to trade under the rules of WTO, which means that all the steps they need to be able to do that, have an EORI number, apply harmonization codes, etc., all those steps that they need to be able to take once borders are introduced in Europe, right? Once they've set all that up, then their business is set up for expansion beyond just the EU. So we're working with customers and also trying to encourage customers to think of Brexit not only as a risk, but actually as a potential opportunity to think about planning for worst case scenario, set themselves up to trade under WTO in case we reach no deals. And even if we do, don't forget, they still have to be providing customs declarations, even if there are deals in place, and to use this as a springboard to think about wider opportunities beyond the EU.
Right. So, Bobby, how will this impact e-commerce delivery at the end of this year for sellers sending goods into the EU from 1st of January 2021?
Well, the introduction of, moving from borderless trade to introducing borders is going to have an a massive impact on getting goods in and out of EU countries. So firstly, that would mean that goods between the EU and the UK are going to be subject to duties and taxes. Retailers need to be registered for VAT in the countries that they're selling into. So that means registering in each country. Customs declarations, like I mentioned earlier, are going to be required, right, regardless of whether there are deals in place or not. The transit times, getting parcels to customers and returns as well, those are likely to take longer. So that could impact service levels to your customers because there's going to be more friction at borders and customs controls and checks, longer, onerous. And all that's going to impact not only time, but also cost. It's going to cost more to be able to ship products over there because of all the additional handling, etc., that's going to be involved. But one of the biggest impacts is going to be that in order to be able to, to put all these different elements in place requires a lot of data. And there's going to be a lot more data required to be produced for customs clearance and also for bringing returns back into the country for duty relief. And fundamentally, the UK are no longer going to be able to access, the 70 free trading agreements that currently exist. So, it is going to be a big deal. There will be some disruption to delivery, which is why businesses must be prepared to look at how can they mitigate that impact and what do they need to do to be ready.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting in that it doesn't matter if there's a trade deal struck between now and the end of this year. I think everything you just talked about, and I'm thinking about my own world of VAT. Businesses, we're out of the customs union, we're out of the EU VAT regime. So customs declarations, tariff calculations, import VAT, it's coming. Ignore what happens over the next few months of the negotiations. I think all these impediments, as you talked about, businesses must plan for them now.
Exactly, yes. So I mentioned on the previous slide, Richard, I talked about how this is going to impact data and the types of data that businesses are going to have to capture and transmit to ensure, to reduce border friction. So first of all, think about the carriers that you're working with today. Are you clear what data they need from you, how that's going to be provided to them? How confident are you that they understand what's going to be required and that they are ready to deal with all the additional steps and processes involved?
Yeah.
When you then come on to how you provide that data, then this is where it can, it's how does it feed into your labeling and dispatch systems and being able to present that data on labels such as your EORI number, your description, your harmonization codes, your descriptions, if that's required. Are your current shipping and labeling platforms able to capture that information and incorporate that into the labeling for paperless trade? And then finally, do your e-commerce systems, do they allow you to, are you able to produce duty and tax calculations so that when it comes to your consumer, you can calculate those duties and taxes for your consumer, so for transparency, and have the choice of whether you want to present goods to them duty paid or duty unpaid. These are all elements that touch the area around data, systems, and technology that will help smooth that path for you.
Yeah, and on that last point, I definitely echo from our side. It's so important. We're finding, and this is an experience we've learned from our American cousins, where we've been doing this for a long time. You must be able to calculate live, ideally, the duty and any import VAT, and just do not give your customers a nasty experience when the when the FedEx delivery person shows up with your goods.
Exactly. And of course, to have systems that give you the flexibility of whether, whether systems that allow you to get the right calculations, but then also give you the choice of whether you want to, add that cost to the price for your customer at checkout, or whether you want to offer it to them duty paid and take that cost yourself. Because, as research shows, when it comes to exporting abroad, if you're able to offer products duty paid, not only is that a better customer experience, but also you sell more.
Yeah. And just another point that's related to that, there are so many reforms coming in next year, 2021, into the EU, where you're going to have to produce an invoice, a VAT invoice for the customs authority. And you're going to have to label, you're going to have to show very, very clearly what you've done exactly. So, that just gives a double underscore for the need to be able to do all of that.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So then, Bobby, if I may ask, what have GFS done to minimize border friction for typical customers?
Well, this isn't new. I mean, Brexit, we've had this cloud hanging over us now for how long, Richard? Is it 3 years?
4 years. 4 years. Not that I'm counting.
Exactly.
Not that I'm counting.
So not that you're counting. So, we've had this pending event hanging over us for many years now. So the first thing we needed to do was just work across the industry with all our carrier partners just to ascertain where they were with it. What were their plans for getting ready for Brexit, what changes they were making, because obviously there's a chain effect, isn't there? So we went out and spoke with all our carrier partners across the industry, both domestic and international. So we did the due diligence with them to understand who was going to be ready, what level of readiness would they be, because if they weren't going to be ready, then we certainly weren't going to be risking some of our volumes with them. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that we then, following that, worked with each of our customers to review their carrier mix, to ensure that the mix of carriers they had were the right mix, were to protect them against any kind of risk with Brexit, etc. So they were ready, they were able to provide the services, all of that. Then the final thing was really looking at our software and making sure that our labeling and dispatch systems, our checkout systems, were all updated to incorporate things like duties and taxes calculator, which, as you're aware, GFS checkout is based on Avalara. So that, the correct customs data can be captured and transmitted on labels, shared with, duties and tax calculations can be calculated and shared with consumers, either passed on to them duty paid or duty unpaid. And then the final thing we did, as I mentioned earlier in the introduction, was open up our new warehousing operations in Europe to support customers who are thinking about splitting their supply chain and doing things such as warehousing or even fulfillment within the EU to help overcome some of these challenges. So these steps are steps which, retailers, if they're listening, can be taking with their own carriers. But really what we've done for each of our customers is ensure that on a case-by-case basis, all of them can face the 1st of January, knowing that regardless of what happens, they are set up for worst case scenario and they have a backup plan to fall back on if they need to.
There was so much in there that I'm only beginning to learn about myself, and I'm a relative EU expert, certainly on the VAT side. The interesting one that I heard in there, though, I think that I've heard a few times on other webcasts around this topic, is being prepared with warehousing on the other side of the channel, whether it's in the UK if you're selling to UK consumers or vice versa. Because what we're starting to see is quite a few of the marketplaces are insisting to their sellers that their goods are pre-cleared already into the EU or into the UK, and so that any customer on a marketplace isn't getting a delay because the seller hasn't properly understood or gone through all of the customs and imports clearance processes. So and we're still certainly saying the same thing to any e-commerce seller. The old-fashioned, as we call it in VAT, distance selling model now is going to be sorely tested through
Yes.
Brexit over the next few months.
Yeah. So yes, it's not just about doing what's going to be the most efficient in terms of duties and taxes, but also it's really mitigating the risk and impact on the supply chain as well.
Yeah.
There are lots of different reasons why retailers are having to rethink their supply chains, and logistics is at the core of everything.
I suppose just one more point on this. The risk must be that everybody's leaving it to the last minute. It's not just one. It's just not just one seller's got to worry about this. It's got to be. I think HMRC. I've heard them say it's 200,000 UK sellers, and a similar corresponding number on the EU side are going to be shipping goods across the English Channel and having to do all of this for the first time with no experience. And so I imagine there's a lot of people giving you a call at the moment.
Well, there are people calling, but also we've been very proactive, because first and foremost, we need to make sure that our customers are going to be taken care of. But also, yes, you are getting people that are leaving it to the last minute. But we're also finding people that are still, quite reluctant to take action. And I think it's a bit of that, what I mentioned earlier, that inertia and just wait and see. So we are expecting to have a lot more people coming to us for help in early January once, the reality hits.
Right. So, Bobby, what are the top tips that you would give to any business to Brexit-proof their delivery, if that's possible?
Yes, I'd probably say it's ambitious to say Brexit-proof, but certainly to try and minimise the risk of the impact of what Brexit could have on delivery. And we've boiled it down to about 6. They're very high level and pretty obvious. So the first one would be make sure you have an EORI number. You need to have an EORI number, or European Union registration and identification number, to move goods in and out of the EU. If you don't have one, you need to get one. Otherwise, it's very likely that your parcels are going to get stuck in customs, which could incur unwanted delays and even costs. So tip 1, make sure you have your EORI number. The second tip is ensure that your products and your data is all in order. So that means ensuring that your products have all been classified and you've mapped harmonization codes to all of your products, because that information is going to be needed for customs declarations. And like I said earlier, make sure you're absolutely confident that your current carriers are ready for Brexit, just as you are. So talk to your carriers, make sure you understand what changes they're making and how it's going to impact you in terms of information, additional data or information they may require, changes to IT systems and processes. So speak to your carriers and make sure that they are ready and that you are confident that they are ready to protect your delivery. So tip 4 is really around ensuring that your systems are able to capture and transmit the data that's going to be required for customs clearance. So firstly, look at your shipping platform. So shipping and labeling. Are your systems, are you able to produce labels with the correct customs data on there that's going to be required to ensure parcels get through smoothly? Tip 5 is look at the software that you're using, your e-commerce platform. So whether that's Shopify, whether that's Linworks, look at your e-commerce platforms and check with those suppliers what changes are they going to be making to those platforms to make sure that the e-commerce platforms, again, are able to capture and transmit, integrate with your shipping systems so that data can flow through to your labeling and dispatch. So just as with carriers, speak to your software suppliers and make sure that everything is joined up and that there are no gaps anywhere. Tip 6, duties and taxes are a bit of a sensitive point, because one thing that we do realize and hear our customers worry a lot about is how this is going to impact the cost and therefore the prices of goods in Europe, and duties and taxes being part of that. But the advice we give is that it's important to be transparent with duties and taxes with customers. It doesn't mean that you can't offer goods duty paid where you pay for that out of your own account. But we're saying that when they come to checkout, consumers prefer transparency. They want the reassurance of knowing that duties and taxes have been taken into consideration, even if it's not going to be charged to them, but they want the confidence of knowing that they're not going to get any surprises. So the question is, at the point of when your customer comes to checkout at the delivery gateway, are you able to present to them duties and tax calculations? Do you have the flexibility to be able to not only present it to them, but also have the choice of whether you want to pass that cost on to them, duty unpaid, or whether you want to have that absorb that cost into your business as duty paid?
Yeah, I'd absolutely echo that. I think it's all too easy to ignore it and leave it to your seller, for the seller to leave it to the customer.
Yeah.
But you can guarantee it, the customer won't be coming back.
Exactly. I think it's really important, not only for, at that point of for getting customers to buy from you, but like you said, Richard, it's critical for customer retention.
Yeah. So Bobby, there's quite a list there for everybody to be thinking about. Some new ones for me that I hadn't realized. How does a retailer know, though, if they are ready for trading post-Brexit?
I think that there's an easy checklist that you can run through, and I've got some questions here. I'm sure there's more, but these are the main questions to ask yourself, let's say. So, like we mentioned before, do you have an EORI number? That's a starting point. Have you mapped harmonization codes to your products? Because that's data which is vital. You need that for customs clearance as well as your EORI number. Are your current carriers Brexit ready? Are your software, your e-commerce platforms, your shipping and dispatch systems, labeling systems, are they able to handle not just capture the data, but also transmit the required data that customs are going to need? And then, finally, if all goes wrong, what's your backup plan? And that's often the question that trips a lot of people up.
I'll bet. Right then, Bobby, any final thoughts? What would you say to e-retailers tuned in today who might be feeling a bit like me, slightly overwhelmed by all of this?
Firstly, I would say completely empathize and understand. If they are feeling overwhelmed, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknowns. But I would reassure them by saying it's never too late to start planning. Okay, get expert help. People, speak to your carriers, speak to your partners who have already been doing some of the thinking for you and answering some of those questions and putting pieces in place to support customers. So it's never too late to start planning. Don't hesitate to seek outside help as a starting point. And then I would encourage everyone to look at the positive side of it, that if you go down the path of preparing for worst case scenario, not only is that going to help you minimize the risk, because the fallback position is that with no deal we are going to default to trading under WTO. So if you already set yourselves up for WTO, not only does that minimize the risk of Brexit, but also, like I said before, you're putting in place all the components that you need in your business to give you a platform for international expansion beyond and outside of the EU. And in a lot of cases, those opportunities are, you're reaching e-commerce markets that are bigger and faster growing than some of the markets closer to home.
I think that's spot on. Just to echo where we started out, because of the path, the withdrawal agreement signed last year, 2019, the path that the UK has taken, pretty much all the measures that you've talked about today are inevitable, irrespective of what trade deal may or may not come in the next few months. So you must take in, and I do appreciate the positive angle that you've highlighted there. It's why stop it? Why stop at the European Union? You've equipped yourselves now to go global, so seize that opportunity. Bobby, thank you very much for opening up the world, the more sort of practical side of what people, e-commerce retailers need to think about as on both sides of the English Channel as we come to grapple next year with post-Brexit world. It's been super enlightening, and you've broken it down into really nice bite-sized tips, some of which I will copy, and I'll try and remember to give you credit back for them. So thank you again, Bobby.
You're welcome.
from GFS.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.